Yeah, Francis Bacon is a super fascinating person to look into historically. How involved was he with the translations of the King James Bible?
Yeah, so he's the final editor, and he's the one who creates the English language. As we understand it, that's going to be used for the KGV. It's going to be the first major project. And so, what Francis Bacon does is he creates two writing groups. One is called the Knights of the Helmet, and the other one is um, the Spear Shaker Society. And the spear shaker was Apollo and Athena, who had the spear as a weapon that they would shake. But they were also sponsors of the sciences and the arts. And so he's developing two writing societies, whom Shakespeare is part of. And now you start to see why some people say, well, what's going on with the name of the society? Francis Bacon, and is he the same as William Shakespeare, who was uneducated, who wrote some of the most famous polytheist writings on the planet?
Yeah.
Um, and how would he got that knowledge? Well, Bacon would have had that, but whether he's Shakespeare or not, there's a relationship there.
Mhm.
And he's created these two societies to create the new language, to take it from Middle English to a new English that would be more of a world Babel language in the image that they want it to be. The end time is going to be like Babylon, as we understand that, that comes just before Antichrist, and the universal religion with Babylon is rooted in the word is rooted in the word Babel in Hebrew. Okay. So it's going to be like Nimrod's Babel, one language before the confusion of the language. That's the language that they want to create, which is the modern English language. And he has them writes all has these playwrights write entertainment, but they're only going to write entertainment for about their own belief system,
Mhm.
about their own religion, about their own ancestors. And they're going to keep their history and their religion and their belief systems alive in it. That's why you have so many mystical things that are in Shakespeare. Like if you go into Midsummer's Night Dream, you got fairies, you got elves, you got all sorts of things that are going on. And the rest is about the royale history for the most part in terms of who he writes about.
Mhm.
So this is the language that has been developed, and when King James takes over, is going to say, "I want to bring in a English language that everybody is going to use, including Scotland, including Ireland as part of Great Britain,
Mhm.
and that I want to unite the empire that I'm building um, with this Bible." It's going to help me solidify and take care of a lot of religious strife that's going on. There's a lot of groups, whether it's pilgrims, whether or not it's the Catholics, there's a number of groups that are at odds with each other. So he's going to do what Constantine did with Christianity to unite the religion, where he united the polytheists with introduction of some Mithraism, which is a branch of Zoroastrianism, with the 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 religion of Christianity, and create this homogenized imagery, which is why we have all of these polytheist symbols within Christianity. And he models that after something that King Shapur did, let's say that 500 years before that in Persia, where he used Zoroastrianism to do the same thing to unite the Persian Empire. So this is the model of the royales. It's
Mhm.
part of, and King James sees him as an antichrist type figure. And so he's going to be involved in this in certain ways, and he puts his right hand man to oversee it, and who's going to do the last editing of it. So when we see some odd things in the King James Version translation, like unicorn,
Yeah. That's one
That's
thing I
the
was gonna bring
influence.
up. Yeah, I've
Yeah,
got a young daughter, and that was one
yeah.
thing I was like dying to bring up was the unicorn. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up.
So the unicorn is used several times, and the word should not be translated as unicorn. I mean, the word Hebrew word is rem, which means a wild bull or an ox. And but in the KJV, that meaning is translated many times as unicorn. And it's used in relationship to interesting applications related to Mount Hermon in association with it, where the giants were created. It's used in the prophecies for the end time for Ephraim as this unicorn that gores the nations. And he sees himself developing this commonwealth through the vision of Francis Bacon and John Dee. That's their vision of what they want the English Empire to be. And that Antichrist in the book of Daniel is this little horn that rises in the end time, a unicorn. So you can't get any more blatant than that. So a lot of people say, well, unicorn, well, so it's just allegory. Well, he has a unicorn on his coat of arms.
Yeah,
And that's heraldic taciturn language for an angelic being. And so typically most people say, well, a unicorn was this cute, cuddly little being that was so playful it didn't hear its calling to go on the ark, right? Because they were just having fun. Well, that's not true because only clean or unclean, not clean animals. I don't want to get confused with the spiritual aspect. Uncontaminated with DNA animals were called to the ark because God knew which ones were not um, contaminated to restart after the earth. So he wanted to wipe out all of that DNA manipulation that was going on and from that technology that we talked about. And he calls
mhm.
all the animals. So the unicorns didn't make it to the ark because they were not called. Now, why is that? Well, they weren't these tiny little, cute little cuddly unicorns that we get in the fairy tales. They were the horses that the Nephilim before the flood rode into battle on. And then they designed a
Damn,
horse like this after the flood for the Rephaim giants. So that when we see these great white horses that are used from in Austria for these Lipizzan horses, they're sort of descendants of this great white horse that was designed for the giants. And these great white horses were used like particularly as it's seen in some of the movies, like with the 300, you have this giant Persian king because the beast empires were all giants. Um, and they have these huge white horses um, that were pulling this chariot for the Persian king.
hmm.
And so we have some sort of DNA manipulated thing that's created by the Indo-Aryans after the flood, and they become masters of the horsemen. All the Indo-Aryans, all of the Scythians, are all the same people who were masters of the horse and the chariot. And they invent the chariot after the flood.
Wow,
And this horse, and it was so big it could take a giant that would be even taller than King Og. I mean, we get one description of a giant that's a dark-haired giant after the flood with Gilgamesh. Now, he may inherit this mythos from the antediluvian side in history because it's common for gods and heroes and kings to inherit not only names but the mythos that goes with it in
hmm.
terms of the position that they have. But he's described in not only the Ugaritic text but the Sumerian text as being 11 cubits tall and 4 cubits wide. So he is 7 feet wide and 19 feet tall. And so if that's the post-diluvian, that's the biggest I have as a benchmark for a post-diluvian, because most of them are like in Greek mythology, like Orontes or Achilles, around 12 to 13 feet tall,
Yeah,
in the range of where Og is, right? So,
hmm.
but the dark-haired ones might be a little bit larger, and they're a different variety of giant with the size and the hair color. Still pale skin, still glowing eyes, still shining ones. And so the giants before the flood were, as I said, probably 20 to 40 feet tall. So now you see where I make part of my dividing line there.
Hmm.
Um, and so the horses were bigger before the flood because the giants were bigger.
Yeah.
So these were chimera beings. And in book two, I actually give a description of what we have coming down from the polytheists and what these unicorns looked like. And yes, they had, a head of a horse with this giant horn, but they had multiple other animals that are through the rest of the body,
Yeah.
to put it mildly. They weren't cute and cuddly, and they could kill an elephant with one single gore of that horn.
Damn. So did people like King James, did he consider himself like part of that bloodline or a descendant of some
Yes.
of that bloodline?
Yes. So he brought Freemasonry with him, or it arrived just before him, but it arrived from Scotland. So Freemasonry is not Masonry.
Hmm.
Masonry is the old um, secret societies and knowledge. Freemasonry starts up just after the fall of the Knights Templar, with some of the adepts and Templars escaping to Scotland
Hmm.
to flee from the French king and Catholic oversight, because Scotland is not under Catholic oversight right now because Robert the Bruce was excommunicated for murdering his rival in a Catholic church, and they looked poorly upon that, so they excommunicated him. And so he's going to allow them to come in, and along with the De Bruces is the Sinclairs, which is the Saint Clairs of France and Normandy. And Saint Clair was the treaty uh, that was named for the settlement when the Norse, the Vikings, took Normandy in 910 to 912 AD, and they called it the Treaty of St. Clair. And
Mhm.
so the Rollo bloodline from Odin changed their name to St. Clair at that point in time. Sinclair is just a transliteration of St. Clair.
Wow.
And so Sinclairs are going to take these under the, help of De Bruce, and Sinclairs are royals as well. They move over with the De Bruces along with some other families at the same time to Scotland. And they are going to utilize the Templars and put them into a new secret society that the Templars are going to run by 1317. And they're going to call that Freemasonry.